Hello everyone, hello. We're on to chapter 7 of The Snow Merchant. It's called The Making of the White Horse Inn, and this is really also going to be the story of Letty's ma, who was called Teresa, because the people of, you remember the people in the inn are frozen, and Noah has said, please tell us the story while we forget the cold. Every Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, Teresa fell in love. It was always with the same boy, the one who lived on Gutter Street, mending nets for 6p a day. He had a bow tie and a stammer. On those 3 days, he came to her house every evening at 6. He brought flowers. The boy and Teresa would go to the taverns, and he would drink beer and she would drink apple juice, right until the end of the night. Then they would search barter for a patch of stars amongst all the clouds to sit under, and then the boy would ask, "Can I kiss you?" And Teresa would say, "Yes, Henry, but do it quickly." And then the boy would kiss her and say, "Can I marry you?" And Teresa would say, "Yes, Henry, but do it quickly." And then they would say goodbye and promise to meet tomorrow in whispers, because saying it too loudly might stop it from happening. The other 3 days of the week she spent ignoring Henry Peppercorn. "Put those flowers in a pot and go away," she said. "I've got work to do for Master Blustaff." "But my darling," began Henry. "I'm not your darling," said Teresa. I can't be Master Blustaff, the alchemist's apprentice, and your darling at the same time. There's just not enough days in the week." "But the marriage," began Henry. "The marriage is off," said Teresa. "I've changed my mind. I'm not going to be a wife. I'm going to be an alchemist." Alchemists, Henry had realised over the past few months, were always changing things, especially their minds. "I'll be back tomorrow," he declared. "It won't matter," said Teresa, shutting the door. "I've made my choice." But come the next night, Teresa would be back under a patch of stars, head over heels in love with Henry Peppercorn. And that was the way it went. A day in love, a day out of love. Apart from Sundays, of course, which they both spent in church, stealing furtive glances at each other while Reverend Gumphrey droned on about the saints. On and on it went for months and months. But if it had kept on going that way, Letty Peppercorn would never have been born. But luckily for Hetty, Henry Peppercorn came up with a plan. One Tuesday, as they walked arm in arm through the grim dark, trying to find a patch of stars to sit under, Teresa and Henry came upon a chessboard. "How about a game?" Henry asked. "This makes a change," said Teresa. "You usually ask if you can kiss me." They sat down either side of the chessboard. "How about a bet?" Henry asked. "What are we betting on?" asked Teresa. Now, what do you think the bet's going to be? What does Henry really want most of all? To marry Teresa. I wonder if they're going to bet on a game of chess. "What are we betting on?" asked Teresa. "A question," said Henry, fighting his stammer. "And the question is, will you marry me? If I win, you have to answer once and for all, and then you can never change your mind again." "But what if I win?" asked Teresa, who thought this outcome more likely, seeing as she was considerably luckier than Henry and considerably smarter. "Then I'll never ask again," said Henry with a gulp. I'll leave on a boat for Bohemia in the morning." "That would make my life much easier. I'd have my Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday evenings free to study," said Teresa, although she sounded far from convinced. And so they began. Teresa played black and Henry played white. It started badly for Henry. He never was much good at gambling or chess. And before he knew it, he was down to his king and 2 knights on horseback. I don't play chess, but I know that that's not very many pieces left. Then Teresa looked at her opponent in his bow tie, flowers wilting in his hand, and she realised that she didn't want to win. Not if it meant never seeing her dear Henry again. And as she realised this, her pieces began to fall off the board, along with all her cares, and the more she began to lose, the lighter and happier she became. "Checkmate!" said Henry. "Will you marry me?" "Yes, but do it quickly," said Teresa, laughing. And they ran to the church on Steeple Street. They woke Reverend Gumphrey, and they were married at 2 o'clock in the morning. As soon as the sun rose, Teresa went straight to Master Blustaff's laboratory as usual. But when he tried to give her a lecture about alchemy, she just sighed and looked out the window. And then he showed him her ring and said, "I can't be your apprentice any more, Master. I'm Mrs. Peppercorn now. I quit." Blustaff, the master alchemist, was not happy. Teresa Peppercorn was his greatest ever pupil, and truth behold, she had more talent in her little finger than Blustaff had in his whole body. He might have his library, his laboratory, and his rows of neatly labelled alchemicals on shelves, but Teresa had imagination, which is by far the most important and useful thing for an alchemist to have. Blustaff begged and pleaded for Teresa to stay. He admitted that he was a talentless old fool of an alchemist, that without her he couldn't even change a caterpillar into a butterfly. When that didn't work, he threatened and cursed, and finally, as she walked out of the door, he promised her he would have his revenge. But threats, curses and promises of revenge had no effect on Teresa. She was in love. She dragged her small cauldron to the top of Vinegar Street where she met Henry. He had just sold his house and net business for 2 shillings and 6pence. "What should I buy?" he asked, showing her the money. "A place to put my cauldron," said Teresa. She looked down at the patch of stony ground beneath them. "Right here will do." So Henry Peppercorn bought the patch of land at the top of Vinegar Street from old Mr. Pitty, the woodsman. He had chopped down the trees years ago and was just waiting for them to grow again, so he was happy to sell it. The land was covered with rocks, pebbles and boulders, twigs, sticks and tree stumps, seaweed, shells and a rusty anchor, silt, sand and seagull poo, a broken chair, a chimney pot and the skeleton of a horse. "It's a dump," grumbled Henry. "It might be a dump, but it's got potential," said Teresa, and she began to work her alchemy. In Teresa's cauldron, the rocks turned to armchairs, the pebbles turned to plates, the boulders became 4-poster beds, the twigs and sticks turned to beams and bricks that Henry arranged into bedrooms, hallways and a kitchen. The seaweed turned to rugs with designs woven in the stitching. The shells became made wash basins and a bath. The rusty anchor became the hearth, and the sand and silt became tiles that Henry nailed to the roof. There were a few things that stayed the same. The chimney pot stayed a chimney pot and went on top, and the horse skeleton they buried. When they had finished, Teresa looked up at the new house and couldn't help but think that Master Blustaff would be very proud and just a little bit jealous. "That's why," Letty explained, "every now and again Bips and Bobs change back into what they were. In another few years this place will be nothing but a pile of old rubbish again. No alchemy lasts forever." "Oh, ridiculous," said the snow merchant. "Ridiculous nonsense." "It wasn't," said Noah. "It made the time go faster." Letty looked up. It was midnight. The 10 minutes had flown by, as if the clock was eager to rub its long and short hands together for warmth. Just as the snow merchant had predicted, Letty felt the last of the ether drain from her. It left nothing behind but a dull, aching tiredness. She looked around and saw the last faint shades of blue leave everyone's lips and faces. Except for the snow merchant, who was still frozen with ether. He had taken 3 drops after all. "Oh, it's good to be warm again," said Noah. "I wouldn't know," said the snow merchant. His blue eyes were locked on the snow. He whispered something to himself, lips curling into a smile. The goggler spoke in Bohemian to the walrus, and she nodded. Letty looked at them both. Something wasn't right. She spotted what it was. This time it was her turn to point and yell. "You're melting!" she gasped at the walrus. "What?" snapped the snow merchant. The walrus put her hand to her head and screamed. Something must have gone wrong with the ether, because from beneath the walrus's wig Big drips were dribbling down her forehead. She's right! She's right! Cried the gobbler. The snow merchant let out a yell of anger, and the old ladies shot from their chairs. The walrus thrust a hand under her wig and brought out a handful of snow diamonds, Letty's snow diamonds. Hey, they're mine! She had told the gobbler no twice, but the old lady had gone and taken some snow anyway. Quiet, barked the gobbler as she heaped a few snow diamonds on the tip of one finger and held them up to her eyes. She goggled for a long moment. There was a dreadful feeling in the air. Everyone looked furious, the snow merchant most of all, his teeth ground together and his face turned a deadly shade of blue. What's going on? Said Letty. Did you steal those? The gobbler yelled out in Bohemian, and whatever she was saying didn't sound very polite. She flicked away the snowflakes as if they were nothing, and even without scopical glasses, Letty could see why. The ether had worn off, and the snowflakes were melting. They weren't diamonds at all, just water, ordinary water. Oh dear, so the diamonds aren't lasting, are they? Now that the room's warmed up, they're melting back into water. Oh, poor Letty. Bye.